And I've just admitted everybody. Hi, everyone who's just joining us now. We're just going to give everybody a moment to get comfortable and get into the room, the Zoom room.
Hi there.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Thanks for joining us. Just going to give it a minute or two more just to see if we have anyone else coming in. Fab. Okay, well, as it's 1:05, I think I will get started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm just going to do a quick bit of housekeeping. We have Ali Gordon, who is our BSL interpreter. So if you do need BSL interpretation today, Ali and her colleague Liz, who will be joining us shortly, will be providing that. So you're very welcome to pin them on your screen. We are recording this session and it is recording at the moment. If you would rather not appear on video, please do just switch off your camera. That's absolutely fine. If you could stay on mute whilst you're not talking, that would be great, just to avoid any background noise. We will have chance for a bit more of a discussion at the end of the session, when we'll invite you to unmute and join in if you'd like to. There are some sensitive subjects covered in the session this afternoon. So if at any point you feel concerned or uncomfortable, you're very welcome to send me a direct message in the Zoom chat. And if you do need to take a moment just to turn off your video and have a break, then please do. We are scheduling in a break about halfway through, about a 10-minute comfort break for anyone who needs that as well. So I am going to start by sharing with you a little bit of information about the New Dialogues project and where it originated from. So I am just going to share my screen. And hopefully you can all see this. Great, brilliant, thanks. So my name's Kate Davey and I am the training programme manager at Outside In. And thank you again for joining us today to celebrate New Dialogues, which is a project that Outside In has been delivering for the past 2 years. And it's a project that aims to challenge who has the authority to tell, to create and to curate the various stories held in collections and archives that relate to the history of mental health and mental health treatment. Is it medical professionals and academics, or can it be artists with their own lived experience? So as the project now comes to a close, this afternoon will give us a chance to reflect on the journey of the past 2 years, and we'll have input from artists who participated in the project, as well as talks from 2 of the curators who were involved at 2 of our partner organisations. And before I move on, I just want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to all of the artists who have been involved in the project, to all of the course tutors, the course assistants, the curators and staff from our partner organisations, which are Glasgow Museums, Glenside Hospital Museum, the Mental Health Museum and Projectability, and to our project funders as well, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the Art Fund and the John Ellerman Foundation. Without any of you, this project would not have been possible. So I'm just going to very briefly introduce Outside In for those of you who maybe haven't come across us before. And then I'll talk a little bit about the context in which the New Dialogues project came about. And then I'll pass over to Dol, who was one of the participating artists in the project and who has worked really hard on putting this event together and will be chairing the next part of the event this afternoon. So Outside In is a UK-wide arts charity that aims to support and provide a platform for artists who face a significant barrier to the art world for reasons including health, disability, social circumstance or isolation. And we do this through our three key programmes of work. We have our exhibitions programme, where we have a number of exhibition, residency and commission opportunities. We have our artist development programme, which offers one-to-one and group support for artists in developing their creative practice. And we have our training programme, which is where this project sits more widely. And our training programme is called Step Up, and it really aims to equip artists with skills that might enable them to take up opportunities in the arts sector. So those are skills like curating, researching, running creative workshops. And the programme has a wider aim too of diversifying the arts workforce and diversifying the voices and the perspectives that we see and hear in exhibitions and in cultural programming more widely. So prior to designing the New Dialogues project, Outside In had already been engaging artists with collections of patient-created artwork for a number of years. And the key aim of this area of the charity's work was to change whose voices were being heard when it came to interpreting, cataloguing and exhibiting work made by artists historically in psychiatric hospitals. And the work started in 2014 with the Graylingwell Heritage Project, which was a collaborative project that aimed to engage local people in Chichester with the history of Graylingwell Hospital at a time when it was being redeveloped into residential housing. And as part of the project, Outside In managed a creative team that delivered art workshops and exhibitions as part of that project. And then our work in this area expanded in 2017 when we began delivering our Exploring Collections courses with the Welcome Collection in London. And the second of these 10-week courses focused on the Wellcome's Arts and Health archives and collections, supporting artists to respond creatively to research in this area, exploring issues like artist anonymity. And then in 2018, we received funding to deliver the Vaudrey Archive project. And the Vaudrey Archive project was a collaboration with West Sussex Records Office, which enabled the preservation and the digitisation of the Vaudrey archive. And the archive comprises of around 194 works produced by patients in art therapy sessions that were delivered between 1951 and 1971. And the archive is an unusual record of early art therapy work, which provides an important insight into the therapeutic process and has the potential to offer a unique perspective on the development of art therapy as a discipline. And this slide shows two images produced by Case Study 2, which are a part of the collection. And the project included a series of consultation sessions that involved Outside In artists, which focused on copyright, consent, interpretation and cataloguing. And this approach provided a new and innovative way of looking at medical and hospital archives, returning some of the authority to those who have their own lived experience. And the consultation sessions saw 7 Outside In artists work very closely with the archive, carefully considering questions like ethics, authority, copyright and consent. And this slide shows some examples of those creative responses made by a few of those participating artists. So all of this work led to the development of New Dialogues in 2019, which has been very generously funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the Art Fund and the John Ellerman Foundation. And the project has seen us work with 3 partner organisations across the UK and over 30 Outside In artists, most of whom do have their own lived experience of mental health issues. And on a practical level, the project has consisted of 6 10-week Exploring Collections courses, where the artists have been supported to explore, engage and respond to these unique collections. 3 curating exhibitions courses, where the participating artists have led the curation of 1 virtual exhibition and 4 physical exhibitions that are open now across the UK. So the partners we've been working with on this project are the Mental Health Museum in Wakefield, which houses a remarkable collection of mental health related objects that span the history of mental health care from the early 19th century through to the present day. Glenside Hospital Museum in Bristol, which has an extensive collection that tells the story of Bristol psychiatric and learning disability hospitals. It also has over 80 documentary drawings of life at the hospital in the 1950s, produced by Dennis William Reid, an artist and a patient at this time. And Glasgow museums, more specifically, their renowned Art Extraordinary collection that's been put together by pioneering Scottish art therapist Joyce Lang since 1977. So earlier this year, we launched Another Space Within, which was a virtual exhibition consisting of works made by the participating artists partway through their journey. And the exhibition highlighted the diversity of themes, objects and ideas within the unique collections that resonated with each artist, illustrating over 30 individual journeys of exploration and creative response. We also have 4 exhibitions open in museums and galleries across the UK at the moment. So we've got Looking to the Light, which is at Glenside Hospital Museum in Bristol until the 2nd of October. And all of these exhibitions bring together the creative responses made by the artists during the project and works from these collections. Recollections May Vary is at the Mental Health Museum in Wakefield until the 9th of December. And we've got Unlocking the Extraordinary at Kelvin Grove in Glasgow that opens this Friday. And we've got a satellite exhibition of work there at Projectability in Glasgow until the 24th of September. So as the project draws to a close, we're looking at our next steps in terms of developing this area of our work. And there will be the opportunity later on this afternoon to discuss which direction or directions this might take us in. But for now, I'm going to pass over to Dol, who will introduce themselves and take us into the next part of today's event. Thank you, Dol.
Thanks, Kate. So hi everyone, I'm Dol. I am chair for this event, but also a contributing artist on the Exploring Collections programme. I was part of the artist cohort that looked at the collection at the Mental Health Museum in Wakefield, which is a really diverse collection that covers the history of the West Riding of a lunatic asylum, as it was then known. It became known as the Stanley Royd and is now no longer, but the site where the Mental Health Museum is actually on a working, active NHS site. So it's a really interesting space to have artwork of this nature being displayed. So part of the reason for this event was going along the journey of the Step Up programme, Exploring Collections. There's a lot that happens when you get to exhibition and people see the final piece of work and they view it in isolation almost. And what I'm really interested in is all the conversations and explorations and pieces that happened along that journey, because in a way that's almost more interesting than the final piece of work, because so much came out of that for us all personally, in terms of how we related to the stories that were told, and very often the stories that weren't told in that journey. So as we go on, you'll hear from artists about their own connection to the pieces, their art practice, and how they explored and navigated what at times, to be quite honest, is quite a difficult subject matter. We are dealing with people's lives, we are dealing with mental health, we are dealing with families and loss, but we're also dealing with liberation and voice and expression and rediscovering what it means to be human. So hopefully you guys will all kind of come along with us on this journey. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat and we will hold them till the discussion section at the end, just so that each artist has a nice clean space to present as they need to. If at any time something comes up and it's difficult, or you feel like you need to step away, this is a safe space. Please do what you need to feel comfortable. you can turn your camera off, go get a cuppa, have a breather, come back. And I just encourage you to stick with it, because I feel like these conversations are really important, and I really hope that the artists get a chance to kind of pull the curtain back a little bit and show their process, not just the amazing final piece. So with that said, I'm going to come on to our first artist, who I'm going to do a mini interview with. So our first artist is Mandy Shepherd. Mandy was part of the artist cohort for the Mental Health Museum in Wakefield, so I had the pleasure of working alongside her on this exhibition. Mandy is identified as she, her, and her talk is Unraveled or Just a Number. So, hi Mandy, if you'd like to just give us a little bit of an introduction to you and your art practice, that would be great.
Hi Jo, thanks for that. It really feels weird this, because now I'm not looking at anybody, I'm just looking at a PowerPoint slide. Yes, so my name's Mandy Shepherd. I am an artist, and I feel like I can say that. A couple of years ago I couldn't, but now I can say I am an artist. And I'm inspired by what I see, and I'm very inspired by discarded items, things that people chuck away. I love things like that. Give me a rubbish box, offcuts and things like that. I'm the one diving in there where everybody else is looking at the new stuff. I love mark making, drawing, embroidery, recycling. I really enjoy making things from something else. Pattern making, that's like a bit of a game to me, making repeat patterns. And I often like to use more than one technique. So I might do some mark making, I might then print over the top, I might put it into digital, print it off, and maybe do some sewing into it. So I like to layer things up. I do enjoy experimentation, which can be a good thing. I do very often sit there thinking, oh, I wonder what'll happen if I just do this. And sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it doesn't go well. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. I'd say looking at your work, it goes well more times than it doesn't, and maybe you're being a little bit tough on yourself there. So I'd like to we're looking now at your piece of artwork that is currently on display as part of the collection. Recollections May Vary. I would like to start, if it's okay, with what first interested you in joining the course at the very beginning.
So I was really attracted to this course because it mentioned Stanley Royd Hospital, and that's what the West Yorkshire Pauper Asylum became known as. And the reason for that is because my grandfather was a patient there. So very selfishly, I wanted to see if I could find out more about him, about his time there, and about what was wrong with him. I didn't get really what I wanted out of this, because when it came to working with the West Yorkshire Archive, the only thing they could find was an admission name. There was nothing else. And from what I understand, sometime in the 70s, there was a fire, and a lot of information, not just from Stanley Royd, was burnt. This was in the old archive building. So I couldn't find out anything about my grandfather. So I didn't want to give that up. So I then looked at alternative ways to find out information. And what I did was I started to interview my family. And that was quite difficult, because his children had always been very tight-lipped about him, didn't want to talk about him, whereas us grandchildren always did want to find out more. A lot of us are quite interested in family history. So it was a bit of a challenge at first to get people to talk, but eventually I did get people to talk. And what I found was I got a different story to the one that I thought that I knew. And that made me realise, actually, what I thought I knew had been very influenced by my mother and what she told me. And I actually found what came back was actually two different stories, two different people. One was a very clever, creative man. He could draw, he grew vegetables, he was a watch mender, he could play the violin, he was chair of the welfare, so he's quite a man of the people. And as a grandfather, we all felt that actually he was a nice grandfather and he would take time to spend with us. He'd sit you on his knee. He even used to let me smoke his pipe, which is probably not a great thing. But and then there was this other side to him, which was the side that his children and his wife knew, which was quite dark and dangerous. He was violent, he was abusive. So I actually ended up with two stories. So it was really interesting for me to go on that journey, to find out more about my own personal family.
So I'm guessing in that then part of my next question has kind of been answered. So some of the surprise element on research for you was finding this duality of, you know, the history that you've been told and the history that you sort of uncovered. What influence did that have on your sort of art process and research? And so we're looking here at some laser cut tokens. I don't know if you kind of want to go down that path of how you came to creating this sort of work.
So that the family connection wasn't the only thing that I got out of the course, and I probably got a lot more out of the course than I expected to, because it was like I said, selfishly, it was the family bit that I was interested in, but I got so much more out of it. The talks were eye-opening, the artifacts were so interesting, and what you're looking at now is a piece of work that I did around the numbered token. A lot of the things that they use day to day were branded, if you like, in that they got a logo on them, the West Yorkshire Pauper Lunatic Asylum logo. And this token with a number on particularly interested me. And I couldn't let that go. That was the first piece of work that I created, was the one that you're looking at the moment. And it just kept, this token just kept talking to me, and I kept coming back to it, and I used it in loads of different mediums. I created repeat patterns, I did dye sublimation, I did cyanotypes with it, I put it into Photoshop, put it into Illustrator, I did some laser cutting, and I did some embroidery pieces with it. It just kept talking to me all the time. So I'd got two things going on, if you like. I'd got the grandfather bit, and then I'd got the token that just wouldn't leave me alone. So that was an unexpected thing. I just would say also, one of the challenges for me is that I am one of the people who went on the course who was actually a full-time student. So it was quite difficult to fit that around my timetable. But what I would say, and I did say this after the course finished, that actually this course in terms of material for my uni course, was the gift that kept on giving. It gave me so much to work with. So using the token, I actually did a lot of this work in uni as part of my studies. So it was, again, another thing that the two things fit together so well for me. The course gave me the facilities, the uni course gave me the facilities, and then the mental health museum course gave me the material to work with. So I got so much out of it.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that from the amount of work that was produced, and the duality in the pieces that you've produced and submitted to the exhibition absolutely speaks to your journey, in my opinion. So now the exhibition is open, how do you, I guess the bigger question would be is what else would you like to explore? Because I know you've made these tokens and you're very passionate about furthering the conversation and engagement. So, you know, what else is there? What's next for you, Mandy? What else would you like to do with this?
So I just thinking in terms of the mental health museum, I have been thinking about, is there any way that I could produce something that allows the museum visitors to take part, get involved in some way? And I have done some experimentation, and I've discussed the start of a few ideas with Jane and Sally, the curators. But I'd really like to take the token further and do something that allows people to do something with it. So for me, what I've always wanted to do, which I've never been allowed to, because obviously it's a piece of museum artifacts, but I'd love to touch it and put it in my hands and just feel it. It just begs to be touched, I feel. And that was one of the things that I wanted to think about, was how can we give that experience to people who come to the museum? So I've looked at if I could do something that maybe might create a stamp that people could use, or rub-ins, or again, just things to hold. So yeah, we haven't done anything else with that, but that is certainly something that I'm quite interested in.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mandy. And like all of the artists, there's so much more here to unpack, and you know, hopefully we'll get an opportunity to do something similar again and do more of a deep dive. If you have any questions for Mandy, her art practice, or anything that was mentioned, please pop them in the chat, and one of the moderators will hold them until we have our discussion piece at the end. But for now, thank you very much, Mandy, for
Thank
sharing,
you.
Especially such a personal connection as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to come on to our next artist, and again remind everyone that if anything comes up for you that you need to step away, please feel free to turn your camera off, go get a cuppa, have a fresh air. We have 2 BSL interpreters. If you need to pin them for your own ease of sort of following along, please do so. And if you need any help with that, then just message Kate or Charlotte and they will help you figure that out as well. So for now, I'm going to come over to Joanne Tiffany, who's another one of our artists who's speaking today. Joanne was part of the Mental Health Museum cohort as well. And again, I had the pleasure of working alongside her on the course. So Joanne Tiffany is identified as she, her, and her talk is called Stitch Narratives. Over to you, Jo Tiff.
I will just say, I'm sorry, because my voice will go funny. For me, I joined this course because I've been doing artwork around mental health since about 2019. I started my art journey because obviously I got ill, physically and mentally, and so I started on the journey of doing my level 1 and level 2. And then I went on to do my access to higher ed, which an artwork will appear shortly. And it was this piece that set me on the journey to look deeper into my mental health. And this was called Fragments of Self, and it's like the distorted reality of what mental abuse can do to a person, how you can look normal on the outside, but I wanted to visualize the actual scars that actually happen internally. And so in my case, I created a piece that was like, I actually had a cast of my face done. And is my video playing?
It should be. Just bear with me 1 second and let's just make sure that that's working as it should do. Sorry, technical gremlins, everyone. Hold with us 1 second. Aha, there we go.
feel like he's just stuck on the program.
Charlotte, if you could just scrub through to when it comes up with a picture. There we go. There you go. Thank you. Now it should just be able to play through now.
So
Sorry,
this
everyone.
was called Fragments of Self, and it actually visualizes the scars and damage that is done through mental abuse. So I took a deep dive into mental health, which led me when I actually went on to do, I'm now a uni student, I'm doing part-time. So I did my first year, and then my second year, I found the Outside In course, and because I've been looking at mental health and disability, it fell into my lap at the perfect time, which is where we create the creative freedom, or creatively controlled, which is in the virtual exhibition under Blood, Sweat and Tears, which I took a deep dive into occupational therapy and the occupations within the asylum. I did, however, want to fill in what I think is a black hole in the museum's findings of objects. There's not a right law about disability, and there was a lot of disabled people in asylums. So because it's very hard and we had a short research week, I had to shift my focus, so I focused on occupational therapy, which linked to moral therapy, which is why it's in a cross, which then led me on to my idle hands blanket, this is my process. I've put a lot of photos out there of the actual thing, so I'm creating a video of me actually making it, and I wanted to show people that even though these were classified as jobs in the asylum, they take a lot of doing. For 2 minutes of sped up footage, you're talking 30 minutes, 40 minutes of me just doing one thing, and all the effort that I put in is basically what the patients in the asylum were doing, and I wanted to highlight that. And through this artwork, I've put in patients' names, the last names, because I want people to be able to connect to them actually being at the forefront of this artwork. This is my portrait, obviously, because it is done in beige and it's invisible, meaning that a lot of the stories or the documentation is doctors led, or so what you actually hear is the doctor's notes. You don't hear it from the point of view of patients, because that's not in the asylum records, and the narratives, it depends on whose narratives that you're looking at it through and whose prism, and that's where you have to be careful on how you talk about curating. And I picked that up a lot from this course, because we can go in and look at Mary Frances Heaton's work and go, oh, well, she's saying this, but we don't know if she was genuinely thinking those, or if she were ill. Or we could read her actual medical notes and go, oh, she were X, Y, and Z, and take it from the viewpoint. Whereas the middle ground in that is grey area. And so for me, the storytelling, I wanted to focus on all the people and the creative jobs, like the weavers, which is why I wove the eyes. Then you've got the knitters, the crocheters, you've got the sewers. All these people, they had an illness, they had a mental health, they had a physical, and yet you had a society, an enclosed society, that was able to run and function with only few able-bodied people observing them, which to me leads on to my actual practice, which I look at social contracts. and how people view people with illnesses and disability, and how we're viewed in society. And I like to make our work about the hypocrisy of that, and how what they think can be altered and changed, because their silence proved it, that you could be ill and you could run a whole system, a whole economy, and still be ill. And that to me is what I took away from this course, that things in society do need to change and can change. And it's very it gave me a lot of confidence to know that what I was working on actually meant something. It built a lot of confidence in me to know that narratives of our work are a big improvement in our work. And yeah, you can draw and paint, but you can also give something to your artwork. It doesn't have to be like, yeah, I don't know, like this is an actual cyanotype of a patient's work, because obviously this is an artifact, and I wanted to use their work within my work, so I cyanotyped it. The tea and the beer that were them getting well, if you do get a job, then you'll get like you'll get an incentive, like you'll get your luxuries, which in a way is still done in society. This is it all combined together, so you'll see like the eyes, the individual squares, which are both knitted and crocheted. But finally, this is how it's exhibited. They didn't get the comfort, and that's where the chair comes in, because it's like, we don't know who used the chair, but if it's a staff member chair, that's linking it to the power of who actually got to use it, and because the patients didn't get to use these items, and that's found out through my research. They were either sold on or donated to like children's homes, so they didn't get a look in, and they didn't get the comfort from the thing that they made. They had the skill. But for me, moving forward, I want people to be able to understand that stuff like this, you get well-being from it. You get the for me, doing stuff like this is like meditation, and having just making a square can be meditative to some people. And that's what I would like the conversation to be, because in today's society, it's like everybody's job's so stressful and they're always on the go, but just having that one thing, like just drawing or doodling, is good for your mental health. And that's why hopefully in the future that I'm hoping to go into art therapy or become a teacher, because I want to pass that on to someone. Because just doing something creative can totally change someone's life. That's it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. I'd also just like to say, because I know Joanne wouldn't necessarily say this, that she's graciously donated the blanket to the museum, which absolutely brings her art practice and intention full circle, because as she mentioned in her talk, the patients that created pieces, very often they were donated or given away without any sort of consultation. So I think it's important to honour the fact that Joanne very graciously has donated that piece of artwork as well. So thank you for sharing. And we're going to come on to our next artist, which is Joanna Henderson. And again, I just want to remind everybody that if you have any questions for any of the artists, you can pop them in chat, and it can be about their journey, a part of their art practice, or something wider. And we will circle back to that in the open conversation part after we have our break. But for now, I'm going to pass over to Jo Henderson. Jo Henderson is an artist that worked on the Mental Health Museum project also. And her talk is about hearing voices. And it's called Your Insanity is My Reality. And over to you.
Thanks, Dol. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay. Creating art, once a hobby, has in more recent years become an important means for me to channel my emotions and express my experiences, including those relating to my mental health. I've been hospitalised 4 times due to poor mental health, and I've always looked at art for a way to pass time in hospital, to express what I was feeling and experiencing, and to depict the troubling thoughts and things that were being said to me by the voices. I will focus on the patient voice of hospital patients because this is based on my experiences of being a hospital patient. The majority of the artwork from the book Your Insanity is My Reality, which I contributed to the Recollections May Vary exhibition, was created in hospital, often using supplies I found in the art room on the ward. But when I wasn't able to access these, I used tea, blood, and fortunately I was sometimes allowed access to my own supplies. The art I produced was my patient voice, conveying my frustration at being restricted of certain freedoms, conveying deep sadness, suicidal ideation, sometimes joy and often confusion. The act of creating this art helped me to not just sit alone with the voices and intrusive thoughts, it helped me show my feelings to doctors, nurses and family, and had a therapeutic benefit, providing distraction and comfort in a clinical and somewhat oppressive environment. It was easy for me to forget who I was, overwhelmed by voices and intrusive thoughts. Art helped me remember my identity as an individual separate to my patienthood. Being able to be part of this exhibition at the Mental Health Museum helped me to solidify my identity as an artist and former patient, and to document my experiences of being mentally unwell. Given the huge benefits I found in my creation of art in hospital, I realised the importance art may have for other patients, whether they know creating art helps them or don't know yet. I think that the patient voice can sometimes be better heard through visual and physical interpretations rather than trying to express thoughts and emotions which can be difficult to convey with words. Access to creative materials for the patient could be essential for documenting the patient's experiences and feelings. For me, I've learned to be resourceful on the wards, sneaking in art supplies I knew would get confiscated, taking things from the art room before it closed at night, I always returned them in the morning, and using materials not intended for art. Ideally, the patient should have access to the art room at least throughout the entire day. Sometimes the nursing staff would keep the room locked. The occupational therapist who ran sessions in the art room stopped coming. The patients were encouraged to do colouring, but wouldn't it be better if they were also encouraged to create art or something physical if they so wished? The benefits of art for the mentally unwell have been researched. I'm sure that's the reason for the art room on the ward in the first place. If art is beneficial to patients, why is it not more accessible, more encouraged and more recognised as a means of transmitting the patient voice to doctors and staff? Obviously, there are financial restrictions, budgets, a dwindling workforce and an ever-growing patient-to-nurse ratio. Where am I? But some of the solutions are cheap, keeping the art rooms open, having staff encourage patients' creativity, keeping the available artistic resources accessible to all patients who want to use them. I recognise I was lucky to have access to an art room. Obviously, we can't build art rooms in every hospital, but just a table with supplies could be a helpful creative environment. I think we could help patients to find their voice and a sense of identity and to communicate their emotions, thoughts and experiences by promoting the adoption of creative means to express themselves in hospital. I would also hope that if a patient finds the use of creativity helpful, they might even pursue it and have art become a part of their identity. Being a patient doesn't have to mean sitting boredly in hospital with few outlets for the troubling experiences that brought them there. It can mean going to a place of respite where creativity and individuality are encouraged as a way to improve mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. I knew I'd get emotional. But thank you for sharing, because I know how hard that was for you. Kate, can I have a minute?
Of course you can, yeah. Let's swap over. Thanks, Dol, and thanks, Jo. That was a really moving presentation. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm just going to double check my notes, but there we go. Okay, so the next artist we've got presenting is Belle, and Belle took part in the course in Glasgow with the Art Extraordinary collection. So Belle, I'll pass over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, so I am based in Glasgow. As you can probably tell from my accent, I wasn't born here, sadly. I have been here nearly 12 years now, but the accent's not shifting. I was raised in Somerset near Bristol. I think the main thing I'll be talking about today is the way that people who are psychiatric patients or have psychiatric illnesses access public spaces in different ways. So the image we've got here is of a large knitted jacket made out of grass, and it was created by Angus McPhee, who was one of the artists whose work was preserved as part of the Art Extraordinary collection. And he created giant-sized clothes. He made trousers and shoes, and he made all of these by weaving grasses that were growing around the institution he was living in at the time. And this artist who's in the picture for scale, this is Joanne B Carr, and she is an artist who's also Scottish, who tried to recreate Angus's work herself using the same techniques. So she also used grasses to hand weave these huge pieces of clothing. The way that Angus's work was usually done was he would spend a long time making the work, and then when he was done, it would just get abandoned somewhere, maybe under a hedge or under the bed. And then when the nurses got sick of having all this grass and straw lying about the ward, they'd actually take it all and burn it, which is kind of horrifying, or maybe satisfying, I'm not sure. For those of you who don't know Scotland super well, this is a little diagram of where Angus was from, was in South Uist, on the islands on the left here. And Joanne, who tried to recreate his work, was from Dunnet Head in Caithness, which is right at the top of Scotland. And I am in Glasgow, which is right down here, where this bit of Scotland's called the Central Belt, because it looks like someone's got a belt and cinched the waist of Scotland right here between Glasgow and Edinburgh. And I just wanted to show you this so you could see how far apart we were making different work. Scotland's quite big and quite different. So I found that for me, living in an inner city in Glasgow, the natural materials that I had access to were very different from the materials that Angus and that Joanne had access to. So for me, finding natural materials was actually quite tricky. I could walk about my neighborhood and try lots of plastic. There was lots of glass and broken glass lying around. There was a lot of synthetic materials, but not the natural materials that Angus used in his work. We do have a lovely park in Govan Hill called Queen's Park, and I did try and collect things from that space, but it felt kind of weird because unlike Angus, who was sitting in the large sort of private grounds of the institution he lived in, the park's a public space and it belongs to everyone. And it felt very strange to go around picking stuff from a park that wasn't mine, it was everyone's. And this was my first attempt at collecting from the park. The Tupperware was partly because I have loads of it, and partly because the woman who collected all of the different works that went into the collection used to use Tupperware and plastic bags and really everyday stuff to collect all this work in and keep it safe. And I quite like the idea of precious work being kept in like takeaway Tupperware. But as well as there being different materials available between myself and Angus, and there politics or the power dynamics of me being outside felt really, really different. And so for me, going outside, I would often be read as a single woman. So if I was sitting outside doing something, I'd get quite a lot of attention. I'd get a lot of people coming up to talk to me. And sometimes that was totally just wanting to know what I was doing. And sometimes it felt very unsafe. So I ended up going outside for inspiration and then coming back into my flat to kind of squirrel away what I had seen and then start making all kind of curried in on the sofa. And this is the piece that I finally made. It's called the Not So Straight Jacket. It is made out of the first ever denim vest that I had when I moved to Glasgow, and all the badges that I'd collected from various places and events. And the sleeves were made out of synthetic wool that I found very cheap in a charity shop, because that was the material that I had access to, that I could walk out and find. But I tried to integrate the kind of natural materials that Angus would use, looking at grasses and trees and the roots that are very obvious to see in the park. And that's how I cabled all these kind of little lines through the sleeves. And the final image that's actually gone to Kelvin Grove Museum, I decided not to send one of me wearing the jacket, but to send in an image of the jacket unworn, but in the park. Because my experience of feeling unsafe outdoors on my own, I feel, is something that a lot of people experience, especially people with mental health problems. And whereas Angus McPhee may have felt safer outside of his institution, perhaps, I know for a lot of people I live with, we tend to feel much safer kind of in our own rooms or in our own flats. And that can mean that there's a lot of bodies missing in public spaces. Like there are lots of people that can't access those spaces, or for whom it's a real struggle to access open outdoor spaces. So I wanted this jacket to become a little bit of a nod to a long history of people who maybe didn't have access to the outdoors, especially in cities, and also maybe to the fact that institutions were very, very bad in many, many ways. But also at the moment, for people who aren't in institutions, there's a huge problem of isolation from communities. There's a huge problem with people who may live physically in a community, but don't actually have any connection to the people around them. And I think that is just as violent and just as damaging as being thrust into an institution and becoming kind of institutionalized within that setting. So yeah, I think that covers most of the ideas I had bubbling away. And I guess I'm trying to think if I've got any last bits to add. No, I think that's everything. I'll probably think of something 20 minutes from now that I forgot to mention. But yeah, that kind of looks at the process a little bit.
Thank you, Belle, and apologies for my wobble in between.
Absolutely fine. That's totally allowed.
But yeah, thank you. And the piece that Belle has created is currently part of the exhibition that's literally just been launched, hasn't it? Do you want to tell people where they can go and access that?
So it was launched on Saturday. There is, if you're in Glasgow and you want to visit it, it is in Trongate at the Projectability Studios. But if you are not in Scotland, there is also on the Projectability website, there is a QR code that takes you to the BSL interpretation of the text and an audio description of all the work that's in the gallery. So there's a little bit of a virtual exhibition as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for presenting. And that brings us nicely and more or less on time to a little pause in proceedings for a comfort break. And to do what I just had to do, which was to take a minute and just collect myself. So yeah, I mean, stay on the call, feel free to go get a drink, visit the bathroom, have a stretch, whatever you need to do. If you want to turn your camera off, you can do. Just pop back into the room when you're ready, and then we're going to hear from a couple of the curators, and then we're going to have a good old chat about everything we've heard and some of the questions that have been popped into the chat. So Kate, is there anything you wanted to say about? I think that's basically it for about 10 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, go have a break, and I guess we'll meet back at maybe just before 10 past. Just
there we go. And then we'll be hearing from Tony, who's one of the curators from the Glasgow cohort. So yeah, hopefully everybody's okay. If not, reach out if you need to do what I did and just kind of have a moment. It's fine. But we'll see you all back in just before 10 past. Thank you.
Thanks.
Charlie, I don't mind hanging around if people need to check in the break. I'm just going to sit here on mute, and if anybody needs to hop in, then I can do. So if you wanted to go and, you know, stretch a little or whatever.
Coffee or something.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Joe.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi, it's Tony from Glasgow Museums. I'm up next.
Hi. Thank you.
Hiya. I'm using my personal computer, which is very old, and it's having a moment.
Okay.
Not a break, but it's having one of its traditional old moments. So I sent my presentation on to Kate.
Yes. Would you like us to do
Can you upload it?
Yes, we have it in the file. Would you like us to?
Oh, I would, Joe. I would so much enjoy that. If you could do that. So I'm not sure.
We lost you there for a second, Tony, so I'm just going to hang on till you come back. Kate, I think Tony's having technical issues, so he's asked if we can share the PowerPoint our end. So Charlie's just gone to stretch her legs. So so that's a little change to what Charlie thought, but it'll be the same process as Jane's PowerPoint.
Great. Yeah, it's all in the folder, so you should be.
Yeah. So when Charlie comes up, just need to let her know. Oh, you're back again. So yes. Tony,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
absolutely fine.
it's having a wobble. Hi, Jane. It's having a wobble. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. When our tech person comes back from break, they'll share the PowerPoint. If you just say next slide, we're doing exactly the same things anyway. That's fine.
I think that's probably the safest thing to do, Joe.
No worries, that's absolutely fine. People are just having a break, and then I'll resettle everyone, and then I'll introduce you, and then
Yeah. Okay, lovely.
know to start. Okay, perfect.
Lovely. Have you had a nice day so far? Good.
Very much so. Yeah, it's been really cool.
Super. Such a good thing to do.
Yes, it's really nice to kind of see the journey to the final artwork, not just the final exhibition.
Sure.
So much work has gone on that a lot of people just don't get to see.
Yeah. No, it's lovely making these connections.
Yeah, I hope so. Hopefully something really, really good will come out of it, and we can continue the work that's kind of been started and just keep it going.
I'm fairly convinced that Joyce, bless her cottons, would be nodding and smiling at all this. This is right up her Strauser.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you're with us to share that part of it. And I'm glad that Claire's in the audience somewhere as well. So.
Yeah, she is. She is. Yeah, she asked me to do this, so I'm happy to do it. It obviously it's not going to be the definitive statement. Joyce was Joyce. So I had it's like trying to understand a cut diamond. It's complicated.
Yeah, formidable woman. Absolutely.
Oh, très formidable. Anyway, I'll have a go. Hi, Claire. You having a bun?
I'm having rice cakes and hummus.
Oh, you lucky thing.
I've got a bar of Galaxy upstairs, so
Now you're talking.
Is that for after?
I always keep chocolate under my bed in case of emergencies, which is frequent, so.
That sounds like a very sensible thing to do, and a real motto for life, actually. I like that.
For sure.
Kate, are you going to or would you like me to text Charlie just so that she's in the no, here we go. Charlie's just talking. We were just talking about you. So Charlie, Tony's having some technical gremlins, so if you could share his PowerPoint and just do as you're going to with Jane, which is just listen out for the next slide, please. Then that would be great. So when everyone's back, I'll reintroduce and you know, the same format that we've had before to keep it nice and simple for the BSO interpreters as well. So, but yeah, I'll give you a minute to find the file, but I think it's in the folder.
Hope so.
It should be.
Yeah, I put it there this morning, so I hope it's still there.
Thanks, Kate.
I put so many in the folder last night, and then this morning they'd all shuffled and disappeared. And I was like, no.
Well, the good news is it's not a very long presentation, but I wanted it to be more than one picture.
Okay, just let me know when you think it's good to continue, because I think we've got a little, well, a few more minutes, because most people are probably going to like tea and stuff.
Yeah, let's give it a minute or so more, I think. So everyone settle back in.
What a great crowd. There's so many people.
Yeah, we're really, really pleased with the turnout. It's fantastic. Not only just to share, but to know that so many people are interested in having the conversation.
Yeah.
Just so I know, do you prefer Anthony or Tony?
Tony. My mum calls me Anthony. You call me, but she's not here. She's not here, so you don't have to keep her happy.
Fair enough. Just so I know. Because everybody else has always referred to you as Tony, and I was like,
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine, Joe.
Thank you.
I get called a lot of things, but Tony's not offensive.
I like to call him Mr. T.
There you go.
I think I'd only be okay with that if he was actually handing me a cuppa. And as we don't have that relationship, I'll hold off on that one.
Joe, it's only a matter of time.
I think we're probably good to get going again. Should we get going again?
Sure, let's get going.
Okie dokie. So as people start to filter back in, obviously not everyone's going to put their camera back on, and that's absolutely fine. So just to welcome you all back from the break, to reiterate that this is a safe space. If you need support, you can reach out via direct message to one of myself or Kate or Charlotte. The chat function is there. If you click the little arrow and it will say the particular person, that will just go to the person and not to everyone if you've not used it before. Similarly, if you have access needs and you would like to, you can pin one of the BSL interpreters to your screen so you can follow along if you need to do that. If you have any other needs, access needs or whatever, please do let us know, because we really do want to make this as inclusive as we physically, mentally, spiritually can. So the next part of our event is going to the curation teams for some of the Exploring Collections sites. So as you know, there are exhibitions across the country, and we are really lucky to be joined by a couple of the curators, one of which is Tony, who's going to be speaking next. And he is part of the Glasgow Museum's curation team. Making sure I got that right. So I'm going to hand over now, and he's going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation. So bear with us because we haven't rehearsed this bit, but it should be fine. So Tony, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, hello everybody, and thank you very much for having me. My name's Tony Lewis. I'm curator for Scottish history. I'm collection curator for mental health collections, and including the Art Extraordinary collection that I'm going to talk about now. It's not the easiest thing to talk about. It's mercurial, but it's made even harder the fact that Joyce has just passed away, and I'm still trying to process that. I first met her around about 2010, 11, or so. And you see one picture, her wee art gallery in Pitt and Weem, the Art Extraordinary Gallery, which she ran herself. And then center picture is a case that's just been installed in Kelvin Grove this year, 12 years later. And when I first met Joyce, she wanted to donate her collection to Glasgow Museums, and she wanted it on display. She wanted it known, and I said, yes, we'll do that. And I'm just very sad that we got there just after she passed away. It would have been a treat to have taken her to Glasgow to show her. But I suspect her blue eyes would have just twinkled, and she would have looked at me and go, very good, now what next? Her ambitions for her own collection really are something that I'll try to navigate and understand as in the future as time passes. So can I get the first slide as I go through what's going to be about 3 or 4 slides. The first thing that I want to emphasize about Joyce is that she was herself an artist. She trained at Gray's School of Art in Aberdeen. She exhibited in Aberdeen. And over time, she would also add her own works, could be embroideries, could be paintings, to her fellow artists that she worked with, whether they would be in hospitals or in prisons and so on. So she saw herself not so much as I think as a kind of mentor, a kind of someone that the artists could go to for encouragement, because she believed that in their creativity, they found their voice, they found their expression, and would help them to communicate what they felt or what they thought in a way that they might not be able to have done so if they were being given a pen and paper or asked to simply talk in front of someone. So it's very much someone that she could relate to would be another artist. So I think that's an important thing to emphasize. And we can see almost a shared journey in her correspondence as she encouraged artists in her collection to keep going. Some of the correspondence is very moving as people maybe move from one pill to another, from one medicine to another, from one doctor to another, and they write to her and say, well, I just can't create now. And she said, well, you get a sense that she'll be always there for them and always encourage them to keep going. So I see the collection as being a celebration of creativity in one. So can I get the next slide, please? The other thing, another key element to Joyce's career is that she's an art therapist extraordinaire. She is a pioneering art therapist in Scotland. 1967, the Glasgow psychologist, professor of psychology, approached about setting up a Scottish version of the Society of Art and Psychopathology, and she duly did, and she became its chair and mentor. But she's not the only art therapist on that society at all. There's other Scottish art therapists go through, and there's ones from Northern Ireland and America, and Mary Scotland, Rita Simon, Anna Bailey, Jean Dermont, etc., etc. But Joyce is a key figure in pioneering figure in Scottish art therapy practice as we enter into the 1970s. And that's what she became known for amongst her peer group or her peer reviewers, who could be psychologists, psychiatrists, art teachers, and alike, everyone who joined her work. She got into art therapy on a journey that first began in tuberculosis wards in Aberdeenshire, where she noticed a pattern of change in patients' expression and the palette they used in the paintings. So she began to say that the art could predict health, and the doctors and the TB ward said, oh yeah, I see what you're meaning. And she got recommended to then go to psychiatrists and psychologists and hospitals, and that's how she ended up working in that sector. We also see that within the that sector, she becomes fairly dominant. She's working throughout Scotland, Aberdeenshire, Angus, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Fife. She also diversifies because as an art therapist, she's not on the NHS's payroll. She's a sole trader running her own business. So she goes and works in, she develops clientele within prisons or D schools as well, as they used to be called. And running, she was part of an innovative program for families in Fife. This is all happening in the 1970s. We see the Society of Art and Psychopathology in Scotland also within the context of a Scottish version of the European Society Internationale de Psychopathologie d'Expression, or SIPE. And this Art Extraordinary became the Scottish collection that would sit within that context. So that's a kind of pathway that was beaten in the 1970s, and the idea of the Art Extraordinary collection finds its genesis somewhere between 1974 and 1977. There's also art therapy in an American practices and American understanding. America and Canada were further down the road in the 1970s with art therapy than Scotland was. So I think Joyce takes some steer from there and thinking about American art historians and art therapy scholars, if you like Shelley Killen. And there's also European interest from Iceland, and of course within Scotland itself, platforms like the Edinburgh International Festival also helped promote this idea of creativity and expression, and Joyce could jump in on that. And she got her collections displayed in private galleries like the Open Eye Gallery in Edinburgh, but also Ricky DeMarco helped her out as time passed in the 1980s, especially thinking of the Bellini collection. Can I have the next slide, please? Joyce was also a collector as well as a mentor and an encourager and a sole trader and an art therapist on the march to promote the joys of professional art therapy. And at one point, Joyce wanted art therapy to be an educational unit that teachers would go to Jordan Hill College, for argument's sake, and get a certificate in art therapy. She wanted it on the curriculum as a professional option. So she very much, drove on that. But in doing so, she became a collector, because part of the idea of displaying what she could do as an art therapist had to be seen by other people. So she collected examples of the artists that she mentored or came across and liked, such as Angus, for example, that she liked. I'm not sure she mentored Angus at all, but she liked what she saw because of the art of compulsion. She was driven to kind of definitions of what she thought would fit her remit in art therapy in the hospitals, and she thought the art of compulsion and art brute was part of that, just a part of it, not the whole of it, but part of it. So she collected, so the collection, the Art Extraordinary collection, you understand it's about 1,200 pieces. What I'm showing you below is a piece in the Spaceman is part of the toilets that were at the Art Extraordinary Gallery, made out of Japanese plasticine by Gordon Anderson. We just could not collect it. We literally could not pick up the walls. It wasn't like Banksy, where you could cut up a wall and carry it away. But it just shows it is extraordinary. I think you'd agree that not many of you would have gone to the loo and walked straight into an alien before. So there was, a bit of fun there. But the collection was a very serious part of her work, and she developed a really interesting collection that gives examples of art therapy work going back to Victorian hospitals and ranging right through to her contemporaries and living. She picked up some celebrity works as well, well-known artists like Scotty Wilson or Pat Dithwaite, but most of the art is collected through people that she actually worked with and knew and had a kind of corresponding relationship with, and that's important. So we see her on her travels, and we see stories and journeys around artists as individuals developing with Joyce at the center. So the process of the collecting, I think we can probably earmark around about the 1970s and take us right through it into the 2000s, before she bumped into a chump like me. As she got older, she began to wonder, or her trustees that she had around it began to wonder who was going to take this on with her. And, you know, I was only too happy to say yes, because it's a great collection. Another thing to understand about the collecting and displaying is that she saw this collection as being, as again, repeat, to be Scotland's part in a wider conversation, whether it be European or global. She was quite happy to send her collection out on tours. I think one time Angus went to Japan and back. So, you know, she wanted people to know that Scotland was participating in this what she thought was a very important conversation about creativity and artists and expression and health. She fundamentally believed in that. So from a local and social background, from where she lived in a little gallery in Heaton, she also participated in the Heaton Art Festival. So you could go local or global with Joyce. She didn't mind. The methodology was the same. It was get out there, get creating, say what you want to say, and believe in yourself. Can I get the next slide, please? So I kind of repeat myself and come back to the central point of creativity of the artist, creativity and expression, creativity as a celebration of who you are and what you want to say, creativity as the art of compulsion and encouraging people to keep on making things, even though they might be down in the dumps sometimes, which the letters or the conversations I had with her were always about, you know, keep going. We have the belief in the healing or the benefit or the redemptive qualities of art and creation. We have her being based here in Glasgow. You know, despite living in Fife, I think a lot of her, we do have a relationship with her in Glasgow through her work with Projectability. Projectability being such a great example of the belief in creativity in its essence. We also have her participation or her again encouragement with Ricky DeMarco and the Edinburgh International Festival. So she found her feet in Scotland, and some of what she had to collect was collected in and around Glasgow, and she had her mentorships here in Glasgow as well, and people who believed in her in all her grandness and on all her global scale. So last slide, please. So this is the last slide, and this is what I want to end up with, about her belief in remaining connected and confident, connected with other artists, connected within a community of people who know and care about that importance of creation and expression, to know one another, to know the similar agencies and galleries and other collectors, and not to feel isolated, but as if you belong within that Scottish, British, European and global context as well, that you're doing something of significance. That the Scottish collection itself is important and contributes to the wider whole, that you're not lost, and confident. She would probably all encourage everyone, even there she is at Edinburgh College of Art, right in her element in front of students, to keep on creating, keep on collecting, keep on displaying, keep on writing, keep on presenting, just keep on. So if you get a gist of what I think Joyce was about and some of her elements, then all well and good. And I hope this little presentation has made you smile and made you want to come and look at Art Extraordinary for yourselves, and hopefully find inspiration for you to keep on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was an amazing ode to Joyce, and it just scratched the surface. I know this time was limited, but to echo the sentiment, please go and research, find out, explore, Google and all that good stuff, because it can only result in you finding some access way into creativity, because that was literally what Joyce stood for. So yeah, thank you. That was awesome. We're going to move on to our next speaker, who is also a curator, but this time for the Mental Health Museum in Wakefield. I spent a lot of time with this lovely lady. She's amazing. She has her own story to tell. But I'm going to hand over now to Jane, who is curator for the Mental Health Museum, as I said, and she's going to talk about the artifacts and some of the stories behind the pieces. So over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Dol. Thanks, and it's lovely to be here this afternoon to talk to you, and such fascinating presentations. Really nice to see some of the artists that were involved in the project at the Mental Health Museum again. And do please have a look on the links that I think Kate posted earlier on, outsidin.org.uk gallery, so you can find out about all the artists that have been involved in the project and more of their work on display. It's been an absolute honour working with. We've worked with 12 artists at the Mental Health Museum, and it's been a real honour and a real learning voyage for me. And I was kind of reflecting on some of the ways it had changed or helped to develop the way we think about our collection here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today, and thanks also to Outside In, who provided much inspiration and new ways of thinking about the patient artwork and the object collection that we have as well. So next slide, please. Just to give you, as Dol has emphasised, the content warning, we always have this at the beginning of our exhibitions and presentations, just to warn you that you might see images that you find distressing or uncomfortable. So please feel free to message Kate or Dol or Charlotte there. Next slide, please. So just for anyone that doesn't know the Mental Health Museum, we are based at the Fieldhead Hospital in Wakefield, and the hospital provides a range of mental health, learning disability and community services. And I think, as Kate mentioned at the beginning, we explore the history of mental health care from the early 19th century to the present day. And we have a collection that has objects from some of the early asylums that were in the area at Wakefield, at Menston, which is near Leeds, Sheffield and Huddersfield, as well as having a really great contemporary collection that continues to grow. And we have objects and photographs, archive material, oral histories, and a reference library as well. Is everyone seeing the slides? I just saw a little message from Mandy saying that she couldn't see.
Yeah, I've just seen the same message. Can I just get a show of hands if you can see the slides, please? You can. Okay, Mandy, you may.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, Mandy, you may need just to refresh your screen or leave and rejoin, and we'll let you back in.
Sorry, Mandy. Next slide, please. So, new dialogues. For us, it was, it's actually, I joined the museum in September 2020 and started working on this project straight away. And as I said at the beginning, what a learning curve, and what an enjoyable and challenging experience it's been. We've worked with 2 cohorts of artists and delivered 3 courses over the time. So 2 exploring collection courses, and at the end of those, a curation project to help inspire ideas for the exhibition that was put together. Everyone contributed to this. It was co-created, and it's called Recollections May Vary, and it's on to December 2022. And I really hope, if you haven't seen it, that you come and enjoy some of these fabulous works that the artists have created, inspired by the collection. And it involved lots of challenges, actually, because obviously a lot of this time we were in COVID lockdown, so we had to be very creative about how we accessed the collection. Certainly the first cohort didn't access the collection hands-on at all until right at the end when we were putting the exhibition together. So it's an absolute credit to those artists that they were able to work remotely and off Zoom to create these amazing pieces of work. With the second cohort, we were able to get a bit more hands-on, and we worked with the fantastic art house in Wakefield, And this is an example of a printing workshop on the left of the screen there, which took place as part of the course, working with some of our objects and doing cyanotype printing. We also visited the archives, and we had a lovely celebration at the end when we were all able to get together at the Mental Health Museum. Next slide, please. So as I was mentioning at the beginning, I was thinking, reflecting, as we would do, on what we had learnt as a museum and how rich this experience had been for us. And it certainly was about starting new conversations. And really, we've always worked with artists, and there has always been a really rich contribution of artists to our space. But this was a project that allowed us to get really in depth into the research about those objects and let them speak in so many different ways, and then really bring those creative responses to the forefront, which also interrogated some of the interpretation we'd already got in place and challenged some of those stories that we'd got in place. These are three of the objects that particularly inspired us. We've got one of the locked boots that is part of our collection there on the right. Some of the cutlery that's got those inscriptions of West Riding Asylum on it. And I know it's not a very clear picture, unfortunately, but the one at the bottom is a picture of the asylum corridor, in which we've got examples of lots of the creative work that patients at the time created to be used. But as Joe Tiff was reflecting on earlier, how creative that was and how much that was part of a job or a labour. That was one of the conversations we had during our course. Next slide, please. Another one of the great conversations I remember having was around thinking around who's telling the story and what our challenges are in taking these stories from the past when we know so little. As Dol was saying, we know so little about the people that we are exploring and researching, apart from medical perspectives, that we are trying then to interpret and create new stories around this, and how we are using other stories for a particular purpose today. And the focus of many of these discussions was around Mary Frances Heaton, who created these amazing samplers. She was in the West Riding Asylum in the 1800s, and she created these wonderful samplers which have survived today, which are in our collection. And they really challenged some of the treatment that she had and why she was in the asylum in the first place. And she argues in a very moving quote about her right to explain herself. So we talked a lot about Mary Frances Heaton and her having her voice, and then us taking forward that story and how we could do that respectfully. And I think that really helped us think about some of the challenges we had as a group of artist curators in interpreting these stories for today and for the visitors that come to the space. Next slide, please. They also gave us a real opportunity to dig deeper into some of the objects. Museums are notoriously busy and staffed very tightly, so we don't often have the opportunity to really look at some of our wonderful objects. And I think that both of the artist groups discussed this particular object, which was one of our really special items from the collection that includes an example of a voice from someone who was actually being treated in the asylum. We don't know who this individual was. We're hoping that it will come from more research. It's basically a stream of consciousness book that was created during the later half of the 19th century, and it includes lots of references that help us date it, but we're not sure, as I said, who wrote it. And I've put a little bit of what some of it says there. We're really excited about this, and I think this is an example of how what an iterative process it's been. We have been inspired to now work to try and get funding to translate the whole publication here, this book, to honour the author as well, and to try and develop our interpretation of this. So what a great opportunity this has given us doing this course. Next slide, please. One of the things that amazed me about working on this project was how the personal honesty of people and exploring those connections between those historical narratives and how they relate to our own experience. And I think this is, we have a lot of engagements with heritage that have gone on for many decades, but one of the most challenging is considering mental health collections, as we've talked about this afternoon. They are incredibly challenging to work with, and they can make us feel very uncomfortable or very inspired. And I think one of the things that I would like to explore more, as perhaps Tony was indicating, Joyce would say, what next, is how we can use these collections more to help people understand their own lives, how we can really open up these collections so that they help us say those things that we've been silenced on, and help others understand those things that we have been silenced on. So this again has really opened up that opportunity for us. Next slide, please. New discoveries. We had a small collection of patient art, but what a joy to actually find a new piece during the course of the project. We were bringing new things out of stores, Sally and I, thinking, wow, what's going to inspire people this week, we hope. And this was a find in a copy of Picture Post from 1943. We opened the magazine and we found this wonderful work of art by an artist we don't know who, an anonymous artist. So from the 1940s, we presume, because it'd been tucked into the magazine. And we put those. We've mounted this piece up as part of the exhibition to join the artists from today, and one of the artists was particularly inspired by this and used this work of art to create her own piece from that. So I think that's a wonderful journey from the store, completely hidden, to out there on the wall, and part of, for me and I think for others, part of honouring those stories that have been really hidden. So yeah, I think it was a great moment for us, that. Next slide, please. So this is the last one. Going forward, yes, as I was saying, I really want to think more about how we can use those collections, how we can. One of the things I've been doing is researching around the country where those mental health collections actually exist still, and actually a lot of those collections from asylums and hospitals don't exist anymore. And I think people perhaps view them in a certain way, and we have to challenge that and show that how useful they can be in bringing conversations up to date and exploring the evolutions of treatments and attitudes, and challenging some of those stigmas and prejudices. We want to keep those conversations going, and what I hope we will do is continue to inspire new activities with the artists that we've worked with during the course of the exhibition year, and hopefully going forwards beyond that, to try and encourage more and more people to engage with our wonderful collections and with the incredible artwork that Recollections May Vary has resulted in. So thank you to the artists. It's been an honour, as I say, and thank you to Outside In.
Thank you, Jane. Amazing as always, and thank you for giving some insight into the actual collections and pieces that inspired the artwork and the journeys for two cohorts. As you mentioned, there was the first that did everything in lockdown, and then there was the second, which I was a part of, where you very kindly and diligently brought pieces from the collection to the art house so we could access them in the safest way possible because we were under restrictions. And as you mentioned, the Mental Health Museum is actually on a working NHS site, so restrictions were in place beyond government guidelines. So there was a lot of things to kind of navigate, and I think everyone involved did a fantastic job. And I just think to myself, if we could do that with so many restrictions, could you imagine what we could do if we weren't under all those caveats? So there was lots of questions in the chat. One of them, just because you've just spoken, Jane, if you're okay, we can come off the back of immediately, which was the significance of the locked boot. So I very ham-fistedly explained that it was used as a restraint element, so the patient could get fresh air but reduce risk of escape. But I don't want to put words into the mouth of the curator. So if you want to speak a little bit about the locked boot, and then we can move on to the wider conversation.
No, you're absolutely right, Dol. Thank you very much. That was what that particular item was used for. So some people interpreted it, particularly at the time, I have to say, as a potential way of offering some freedom, so people could walk around the grounds of the asylum or hospital without accompaniment necessarily. But obviously it was incredibly restrictive. The boots are weighted at the bottom, and they're also locked so that they can't be taken off, so they couldn't be used in any other way or thrown at anybody. And this was one of those, in the exhibition space, we have lots of those plural conversations going on where there's one view which says, yes, this was incredibly liberating for people, but then obviously there's another side to that story about how restrictive and controlling that was. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, that was a common theme for the artists at the Mental Health Museum with that collection, was the duality of control versus care, both then and now. Again, some of the omissions from the collection that a lot of the artists, including myself, felt, a lot can be said about what isn't part of the collection as much as what is. So thank you for kind of clarifying that. I didn't want to speak as a curator because that's not my area of expertise, so thank you.